Welcome to the Virtue Podcast. I'm so excited for this little mini episode, although it's not that mini. It's mini because I normally do a much deeper dive into things, but this one came up because I really wanted to explore with you guys the mechanisms behind strength. And it came up because I realized two things. Firstly, I'm deep in the thick of creating a pull-up program, and that should probably be out very close to the time of the release of this podcast. So make sure you check it out. Head over to my website, shonavirtue.com. And there's a pull-up program, which is basically the roadmap to getting your first pull-up or improving your current pull-ups. So I'm talking a lot about strength within that and how the body develops strength. But I think one of the most important and often underlooked aspects of just jumping into weight training and strength training in general is that many of us aren't actually taught how strength develops in the body. And maybe some of us are like, well, I don't really care. But I'm assuming that if you are here listening to this podcast, there's a part of you that does care. I think it should be more commonly taught, actually, because much of what happens in the gym, on the yoga mat, within our bodies, has transference into other parts of our life. I'll explain more about that when we hit the psychology of strength and psychological readiness for strength. But this podcast is essentially going to explore and unpack the physiology and the psychology of getting your first pull-up or gaining strength through the lens of your first pull-up. By the way, for those of you that have listened to this podcast before, have watched this podcast before, welcome back. Thank you for being here. If you find this helpful, if you found any of my podcasts helpful, it would mean so much to me if you just gave it a thumbs up or a 5-star rating. I'm going like this with my thumb for those of you that are watching, because on Spotify, on Apple, I think it's literally like a quick swipe of the thumb. It's like faster than a dating app to just give it a 5-star review. And I want to hear from you. So reach out, let me know, like, how has this podcast helped you? What things are you currently working on in your life, be them physical or psychological? I just love hearing from you guys and chatting to you guys. And also please feel free to reach out to me on any of my platforms, YouTube, Instagram, all the things, TikTok. Now, for those of you that are new here, that have just landed here today, welcome. On the Virtue Podcast, I unpack the science of movement and the psychology of change and translate it into strategies that you can actually use today. We are all about making sure that the information overload that we experience can be funneled into things that we can really apply to our own life, things that we can apply to our training, our relationships, every aspect in some way, shape, or form that's going to better our experience, that's going to help us to experience more life out of our current life. And that is why in today's episode, I want to cut through the confusion that exists around strength training. And also just remind you that strength isn't necessarily about size. So we can be strong and not necessarily massive or big. A gymnast or a dancer is a really good example of that. They have incredible strength in their body and yet they're not massive. Strength isn't a single adaptation. It's actually a symphony of changes across your nervous system, your muscles, and your connective tissue, all shaped by consistent and progressive training. So let's start with the nervous system. In the early stages of training, most strength gains, they come from not necessarily bigger muscles, but from your brain and your nervous system getting better at what they do together. And this process is known as neural adaptation. So your central nervous system becomes much more efficient at recruiting motor units. And if you haven't heard of those before, they're basically one motor neuron and all the muscle fibers that they activate. So you can think of it like a light switch connected to a group of lights. When you flip the switch, all those lights turn on together. When your brain sends a signal, those fibers contract in unison. Some motor units are small and they're precise, like the ones that are in your face or your fingers, right? And then others are much larger, like the ones in your thighs, and they're really just built for power. Now, the more motor units that you can recruit and the more coordinated they become at recruiting, the stronger and more controlled your movement is going to be. Now, you also improve the rate at which these signals are sent and how well your muscles work together across these joints. Now, this beautiful neuromuscular coordination is especially important in exercises like the pull-up, right? Which require this kind of synchronized effort from your lats, your scapular stabilizers, your elbow flexors, right? Things that bend your elbows, and also your abs. And it's why you often feel stronger before you actually look stronger. your brain and your body are simply becoming much more connected. Now, as you continue to train and apply progressive overload, muscle fibers begin to grow. And this is the process known as hypertrophy. Now, this can involve both slow twitch, or type 1, and fast twitch, type 2 fibers, but the extent and type of the fiber growth kind of varies depending on your biological sex, your training style, your genetics. Research, however, does suggest that women may experience relatively more growth in slow twitch, that type 1 fiber, compared to men, probably due to hormonal and metabolic differences. That said, fast twitch fibers, which are responsible for generating strength and power, can still grow in women, especially when training includes those heavier loads and explosive effort, such as exercises like the pull-up. Now, at a cellular level, this growth is triggered by mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and signaling pathways, the most well-known of which is the mTOR pathway. So you can think of mTOR as your body's muscle building switch, actually. It gets turned on when you train with resistance, when you make sure that you eat enough protein, when you have sufficient energy or resource available. Now, when switched on, mTOR signals your cells to build and repair muscle. So more technically, mTOR regulates muscle growth, it regulates cell repair, nutrient sensing, and how efficiently your body uses protein. It's especially responsive to the amino acid leucine. And the thing that's really important here is it's not just about training, it's also about beauty as well. Anyway, so if you're strength training and fueling well, your body gets this message, let's rebuild this muscle stronger than before. But if you're underfueling, overtraining, or chronically stressed, that message, it gets kind of muted and muscle growth slows down. Now, in the context of pull-up training, hypertrophy or muscle growth shows up in our back muscles, the lats, teres major, and biceps, which are upper body muscles. You've also got some other shoulder muscles as well, and these all help to stabilize the shoulder blades. Your core and your glutes are also active, but I wouldn't necessarily say you're going to grow in the glutes, but they help to stabilize the pelvis and the spine. Super important for that movement. It's important to remember hypertrophy without coordination, though, is only going to take you so far. So a bigger muscle, and this is what I really want to stress, isn't automatically a better one, and efficiency still really matters. Now, the pull-up isn't just a test of strength, it's also a motor skill, and that means it involves learning and refining movement patterns through repetition and feedback, not just through building muscle. Now, according to the very well-established Fitz and Posner model, motor learning occurs in 3 key stages. So first, we've got the cognitive stage, and this is where your brain is working overtime to figure out how to do the movement, right? Your reps feel super awkward, inconsistent, disconnected. And at this stage, you're relying really heavily on feedback, usually from a coach, right? Usually from me, or a video even, as well as your own internal feedback, like proprioception, or your sense of where your body is in space. And then this leads to the associative stage. Now here, things kind of start to click. Your nervous system begins refining the movement pattern. Muscle firing becomes way more coordinated. You begin to feel your way through the rep. And this really is an ideal time to include that tempo training, right? Eccentric lowering, isometric pauses, all of them help to build control and reinforce that pattern, that neurological pattern. And then finally, we reach the autonomous stage. And this is where the magic happens, right? The movement becomes much more automatic. Your brain requires far less cognitive effort, and you can now execute each rep with just chef's kiss, coordination, confidence, precision, all the good things. Now, improving your skill acquisition, in other words, becoming much more proficient at pull-ups, isn't just about doing more reps, it's actually about doing reps with intention. And that means practicing specific variations that directly transfer to your goal. This is why the lat pull down is still really, really important. But so is a band assisted variation, right? It all helps to reinforce that pattern. Pulling your body through space requires refined proprioception, right? Your body's ability to sense its position and movement without necessarily relying on visual cues. And that's one of the biggest challenges in pull-up training, because you can't really see yourself doing it in real time. There's no mirror to necessarily guide you. And even if there is, you're looking at the front, not the back. And that's why we have to cultivate kinesthetic awareness through mindful movement, breath control, internal focus. And that can sometimes be the missing link. It's just that you're not focusing enough on those sensations. Now I want to talk about what might be the most underrated yet most powerful aspect of achieving your first pull-up: psychological readiness. So at the center of this is something called self-efficacy. I've spoken about it many, many times, and I will continue to talk about it. It is a concept developed by psychologist Albert Bandura. But put simply, it's your belief in your ability to succeed at a specific task. And while it might sound like just another motivational buzzword, self-efficacy is actually one of the most strongest predictors of long-term behavior change. And it directly influences how likely you are to stick to an exercise routine. It also indicates whether you're going to persist towards your goal when things get hard. And it also shows how resilient you are in the face of setbacks, broadly speaking, and then obviously within the context of your program. So how do we build it? Especially when we have none, right? Like self-efficacy, it grows through being able to do the thing. But what if you can't do the thing yet? So there are 4 key kind of experiences. The first is mastery. So succeeding at scaled versions of a task. In the context of pull-ups, that might mean performing a slow negative or a band-assisted repetition, or even holding yourself at the top, right? So every small success, it starts to wire a sense of confidence. The second is through what's known as vicarious experience. And that's when you basically just see others that are like you in a situation like you succeed. So when you watch someone that you relate to achieve their first pull-up, it strengthens the belief that you can too. The third is social persuasion. So receiving credible encouragement from people that you personally trust. An example would be like me, right? Hopefully you trust me. And when you hear me, a coach, tell you that you can do this, it obviously provides a sense of kind of borrowed confidence in this. And then finally, physiological feedback. So learning to interpret things like fatigue, shaking, temporary failure, not as signs that you're broken, but actually a part of the process, signals that adaptation is very well underway. Now here's the hard truth. If you don't believe that you can do it, you're less likely to stick with it. And the problem with that is that then inconsistency breeds bad results, right? And unfortunately, the problem with women, especially those who weren't socialized to strength train, grow up believing that they're just not strong, whether it's upper body strong or just strong in general. And I hate that. But the truth is, strength is trainable. It's not a personality trait. It's a combination of biology, strategy, and belief. And it can be developed over time. And from a neurological standpoint, neuroplasticity tells us that your brain rewires based on what it repeatedly experiences. So every time you show up, you practice and you reframe your struggles, you're not just changing your body, you're literally reshaping your brain, literally. And that's the real magic of training, right? It's not just physical transformation, it's psychological, it's emotional, and it is absolutely empowering on every single level. And it's why I will never stop this, even though I'm pursuing further study and working very hard to become a sports psychologist. The reason I wanted to get into sports psychology was because 2 reasons. One, I genuinely love sport. I love training. But I also think that in the fitness space, in the fitness industry, we aren't aware of just how powerfully our psychology, our self-belief impacts the outcomes of our health changes. And because I will always be passionate about helping people to understand just how much more life you can get out of your life if you are in a vessel that really truly supports you, I'll always be passionate about that. I know that the missing link very often and all too often is with how we are working up here. And for those of you not watching the podcast, I'm sort of like circling my brain, right? I'm circling my head. It's like everything that we believe about ourselves is going to dictate those outcomes. Sometimes we have to kind of fake it till we make it. We have to believe that we can do it. Oh my gosh, it sounds like a basketball movie from the 90s. You gotta believe. But it's true. You have to. It's a really powerful thing. The expectation effect is going to make a difference.